Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
Was that Parisa?
Yes.
Here.
Hi, Parisa.
Hi. Hello.
All right, we're letting everybody in. We are recording this morning because we've got a lot of folks who requested to be able to go back to this as reference material after today, and I think it's a great idea.
I would have worn something different if I had known that.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning,
morning.
Wendy.
Good morning, Wendy.
Hello. Hi, Roya.
Hi.
All right, Wendy, I am still letting folks on, but if you want to take it away and with introductions.
Okay, very good. Thank you all for coming in this morning. If you want to put your photos on, and because if I ask for show of hands and stuff, it's actually nicer to see if people want to respond. I'd like to remind you that, thank you, hi. There is a chat section in the bottom. I don't see Teresa, a Q&A.
Oh, I don't have it set up for Q&A, but they can just use the chat.
Okay, well, the problem with the chat is that sometimes it goes all the way down and we miss it. But anyhow, will you keep, maybe Teresa, you keep an eye on the chat to see if
Absolutely.
there's questions? Okay,
Isn't Teresa on your?
well, Teresa's secondary, somebody has to watch the chat. I don't care who it is.
I'll do it.
Okay, so, and
Okay.
Brad, so I have Brad Rosansky on our panel today, and I have Mo Capadona on the panel, and then I've invited Michelle Teichberg on my team. We just had a record 26 offers presented on a listing a couple of days ago, so she's fresh meat on how to handle a mega multiple. So I thought it would be helpful to hear from her as well. So I wanted to just get a show by hands, if you would, of the people that are here today. Like, who can tell me who's been involved in a multiple in the last 30 days? So a lot of us.
6 weeks. Yep.
Okay, that's good. All right, so what I wanted to do, I thought it would make sense to kind of break it down into like two parts, like how are you handling this as a seller and how are you handling this as a buyer agent? Because I think kind of if you are heavy on buyer agents, sometimes it's helpful to know, hey, well, how is a listing agent looking at this? And conversely, those of us that are mostly on the listing side, you know, how are buyer agents like putting this together? And I thought we'll try to kind of keep it separate if we can. I'd like to start maybe on the buyer side. And just give me a sense, Brad, have you been involved recently as a buyer or listing agent? What have you, where have you been?
More on the seller side. So.
Okay. Mo, how about you?
In the last 30 days with a buyer, but a couple months ago in COVID as a listing agent.
Okay, Michelle, I know you've been on the listing side, but have you been on the buyer side too?
Absolutely, for sure. A lot on the buyer side, actually.
Okay, good. So let me start. Whoa, I just went away. You're right, I'm back. So let me start with Michelle. How many offers are you making typically to get a buyer into a house? Like how many times do you have to do it?
I would say on average, let's say 2 times. But it really obviously depends on the buyer. Are they more first-time home buyers, or is it more a seasoned buyer who's been through the process and really understands? I try and give them a really good education about putting our best foot forward. And I try and talk about, depending on their price point, if I believe that they're going to be in multiples, I try and start having that conversation right away to plant the seed so that they don't need to lose 1 or 2 houses to be able to actually win.
So what do you say? What are the type of things you say to plant the seed?
I start kind of talking about different ways in which when you're in a multiple, you can quote win. And I don't always, I explain to them that winning isn't necessarily always the highest price, because I think a lot of times, particularly a more uneducated buyer, always thinks, well, I have to be at the highest price to be able to win the home. And I don't believe that's the case, particularly as a listing agent and hearing what sellers are often looking for. So I start talking about earnest money deposits. I start talking about every category down the line, rate on contingencies and everything.
Okay. Brad, do you want to echo or follow up with anything that Michelle's saying? Like, what are the type of things that you would say to a buyer? And how do you get a buyer to understand that you're really on their side when you're telling them about all the things they have to do to really appeal to the seller?
Well, and actually it's interesting what you just said, because sometimes you'll do an initial interview with a buyer and you'll tell them the things they may have to do to win, and then you get fired. Because they don't think you're on their side, what you just said.
Right.
And so my things are very simple. If I'm representing a buyer, obviously if you can do a pre-inspection, that's a no-brainer. I want the biggest frickin' deposit they can give me. But I've done them with $500,000 before.
I just did that.
Yeah, because in today's world, as we all know, there's very little you can do to set them apart. Now, we all know a lot of buyers won't play that game. So, and the other part I think that's more important is the relationship with the listing agent that you have or don't have.
So let's talk about that. So, I mean, we all know, like, hey, you can work them when you know them. What happens when you really don't know how the listing agent? How do you start establishing a relationship?
Oh, quite frankly, kiss their ass.
Okay.
You check their ego. You check your ego. If you have an ego in a multiple situation, you're bound to lose it.
Okay, so how do you kiss their ass? What do you do? Are you calling them? Are you
you
sending
give
them flowers? Like, what are you doing?
Male hookers are usually good, right, Wendy?
I'm up for that.
I love management in this office. I mean, if I think you're giving me, you're pompous or you're giving me bad information, I'm not going to debate you. I'm just going to say yes and move on, because again, we all know the last deal I just got, it was relationship driven. I think we only got it by 5,000.
Yeah.
And
I
so-
always Google the listing agent if I don't know them, and see what I can find out about them with my sphere and my years around here and in real estate. I can usually connect with people both in real estate and personally who know something about this agent. And I have found that to be hugely helpful in how I'm talking to them and how I'm relating to them. And I always find something that we have in common.
I
I'm
love
also
that.
asking for help. In other words, hey, Wendy, I'm having problems coming up with the value, and not telling you, hey, you're wrong, because maybe you're right. Can you show me how you got there? It would really be helpful, instead of debating, like, what are you doing?
Right. In a multiple, you don't have a whole lot of leverage, but I think that's a good advice, Brad, for any offer, even particularly maybe not even in a multiple. But anybody getting contracts, multiple offers through with financing contingencies, and how do you make? Oh, I see Joe Dawson on here. Aren't you smart? But how are you making a offer with financing in multiples and not being tossed out? Michelle?
So one way I've done that is to write in cash with the option for the buyer to obtain financing, fully with the buyer understanding that if they potentially don't get financing, they are obligated to go through and purchase the house in cash. And that's been one way that's, go ahead.
So you're saying, so buyers that have like a 401k or
correct, money in the market, whatever it is. Now, and they're really not intending to liquidate it. That would be a very last resort.
Are you doing that, Brad?
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting. The deal we just got, she looked at the buyer's stock statements and goes, if there's a crash while we're under contract, they don't have enough cash. So I really respected what she did. I looked sort of foolish because they were going to get financing anyway. The danger right now, and Joe can throw in with this, with financing, is and going non-contingent, is the financing world is changing every second. If you have rental properties, Wells Now and SunTrust won't give you any credit for a dime of your rental income. And they count the
That's true,
expenses
Joe?
against you, huh?
Joe, is that true?
Brad had told me that. That's not what we're experiencing at Prosperity. We're still able to provide credit for rental income. But Brad is 100% right with, I don't feel comfortable telling buyers to waive their financing contingencies unless I've seen all of their documents. And even still, I always have to warn them, with the economy ever changing, we've had situations in the past where people have lost their jobs in the middle of the transaction. And obviously that's not their fault. It's not ours. It's not the agent's. But in that situation, their earnest money deposit may still be at risk. So I try to coach them up as best I can about the risks of that. But if I don't have their documents, if I haven't seen them, if they haven't been through underwriting even, sometimes I just don't feel comfortable telling them to waive that. But more often than not, people are losing out on multiple offer situations so many times. I think they're starting to get a little bit desperate and they're willing to waive those financing and appraisal contingencies.
Hey, it's Michelle Davis. I just wanted to tag on to the rental income. With COVID, we do allow it, but it's gotten more significant to the point where we need to see the most recent deposit of rent. So we need to know that it's actively rented, not just that it was rented historically, which is what we've done in the past by looking at tax returns, but we need to see that they are currently receiving that rent up until the day they close.
Yeah, we own a fair amount of commercial property and they wouldn't give me credit for a dime of it.
That's
So-
because they know you. I have had some success with buyers in getting them to include, only in competition, in getting them to include language in their offer that says that the buyer is ready, willing, and able to liquidate any and all assets necessary to complete settlement. Now, not everybody is comfortable with that. And as a listing agent, when competing offers come in, I've asked agents if they want to include that language, and I've never had anybody agree to it. But with buyers, I have had buyers who would put that language in when they were sophisticated enough and anxious enough to get the property.
Teresa, you see a lot of offers coming through the office. I mean, what are you seeing as far as, I don't know what's in multiples and not. So, obviously some you know, some you don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that strategy is out there. However, you do have to have the cash to back it up, right? So if you don't have the cash, then what are you going to do? Because you don't have that opportunity. And I will say, just as a caveat, you need to use the language, just like Michelle said, that the buyer has the option to get financing. Because if you don't use that language, you have no opportunity to get back in the property to do an appraisal and all the other things that you need in order to get financing. So make sure that you, even if you put down cash, but the intention really is to get financing, that you use language that will allow you to get back in.
And Teresa, one caveat, you have to also add that they'll give access to the appraiser.
So I have
You could have a
standard
son of a gun
language
that
that I
won't.
use for that, and it goes like this. It says, this contract is not contingent upon financing. However, buyer reserves the right to obtain financing and seller agrees to allow access to the property for an appraisal if needed. And so I never have anybody like refuse that language. Yeah.
And we
So-
do have some questions here from Sue, and Brad had asked Sue to ask again because I'm not sure that I understand the question. Sue, do you want to ask really quickly about your huge EMD, all cash, and the stock market crashing?
No, I was just saying for Brad, excuse me, if you use the, you go in all cash, put down a huge EMD and say that they've got the stock to back it up. And she says, what if it crashes? Just say, doesn't matter. Look, we just put down $500,000 EMD or this or that. So that the sellers are still covered and still sitting pretty. Worst case, if it falls through, they still have $500,000 or whatever you just said your EMD was. So I'm just saying that's one way to counter an agent coming back to you saying, what if the market crashes?
Got it. And Phyllis Wiesenfelder on that same point said that she's had some buyers get their
That's it.
parents to guarantee the loan as a backup in case the.
Yeah, that was my next question. Brad, how would you look at it if you saw a cash deal with like gift funds if needed? You know, because
That's
when
easy.
you open it up, the gift funds kind of create its own little wormhole.
Well, first go back to Sue's thing. Sue, the advice you give that client, if it's really coming from the stock market, I learned this years ago from a client of mine, you tell them to cash those stocks in today while they have the money. Because we're all greedy and, oh, it went up another 10 points. Well, you know, could have gone down 10 points and now you can buy it. So that's the advice. Wendy, in regards to your question, I already forgot it.
Oh, about the cash, like if from Bank of Mom and Dad, you know, if
Oh,
somebody.
yeah. That I want to see that money deposited within the home inspection contingency. So I'll make a contingent upon those funds being put forward for a very short period of time. So in other words, I'll come back. This contract is contingent upon Wendy Banner receiving the gift funds from Mom and Dad by the end of the week, whatever the date might be.
So you want the money transferred in? You don't
In the
want a
account.
gift letter, nothing?
Gift
Even,
letter.
what if they only need it if necessary?
Oh, that's getting too specific.
I'm just saying, like, in other words, you're planning to get a loan, but, you know, they could back it up if they needed to. Chances are that's what's going to happen. It's like a fallback, and the parents don't want to give that money unless they absolutely need it. We actually had this happen when the whole COVID thing started, where the parents decided they didn't want to give the funds. So obviously it's not as good as being able to verify the funds in the buyer's own account. I think we'd all say that. And secondarily, yeah, so I'm just wondering, like, I don't think you're going to get that if it's in a backup situation.
Well, you could throw in additional contingencies that, you know, may muddle it up. You know, in the event that buyer's mom refuses to do it, they're going to forfeit their $500,000
Right.
deposit.
Right. That makes sense.
But if
Yeah.
you're competing and you have an offer that's close to that or almost close to it, I'm not sure that I would take. Sellers aren't going to work, I don't think, with an offer that's got too many non-tangibles in it.
I agree. Michelle, are you putting the COVID addendum in a multiple offer situation? And when you saw these 26 come in, how many of the 26 had a COVID?
I was shocked. None of the 26 that I saw had that COVID addendum.
Are you okay? So that note to self probably shouldn't
Yeah.
be doing that. I personally think that COVID addendum was written very early on, and I think it really needs to be modified now, because I think it's a total walk away clause for any buyer, because it just says if you've been exposed to, well, everybody at this point could claim they've been exposed to it. So I was kind of curious if anybody is still using that in a multiple.
Yeah, and I'll just add in, Wendy, from an office standpoint, we're hardly seeing the COVID addendum being used at all unless we know there is an exposure risk at the onset of the contract, but very rarely at all in the office are we seeing that.
Okay.
But if you get an offer, multiple or not, with the COVID addendum, you take it out?
I'm amending the language. It said, I'm just scratching out exposed to.
Okay.
And then I'm saying, or I'm quarantined, and then I'm adding by a medical doctor with a written order. So that I'm clarifying, because everybody could say, oh, I have to self-quarantine. And then there's the last line thing there that says, and any other COVID-related possibility things. I cross that whole thing out. So I don't have anybody that's not accepting the changes. But if you haven't read that addendum,
It does. It's a
I think it's worse for a seller than for a buyer. So
Absolutely.
I think it gives the buyer the total right to walk away. So be careful with the listing agent. When you're working with a buyer, Brad, are there times that you're not using an escalation clause, or are you mostly using an escalation clause?
I say if it's competitive, we're using the clause. And I saw one of your questions in there is escalations with no caps, unless I'm going ahead of the game.
No, go ahead.
And Teresa can correct me if I'm mistaken. I don't believe that makes a contract if it doesn't have a number in there for the escalation.
Yeah, I mean, actually, and Michelle and Wendy, I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this, because we had this exact situation with their 26 offers, and Wendy had some some particular thoughts about it. But it is a definite strategy that some folks are using to basically so that they will focus on, the seller will focus on your offer because it makes a statement, right? However, everybody has a cap. With all escalation clauses, you have to go back and get them to accept the price. So I would say, Brad, any escalation clause allows the opportunity for the buyer to decline and say, actually, on second thought, I'm not going up to 1.1 or whatever it is. So,
Teresa, is there ever a time where somebody doesn't have to go back and get that initialed off by the buyer? I mean, we've always been trained to do that, but do they really have to?
absolutely, absolutely, you would have to go back and get it. It has to be and that's why some listing agents just go straight for the highest and best. So, and I think you guys use this strategy too. Maybe you narrow down to the top 5 and then give me your highest and best.
So that's a little bit different, like when you're in a mega multiple where you have more than 5 or not. But what's really fascinating, I know an agent that's in like the Silver Spring market, and let's say the house is for 600. She doesn't use a no cap. She goes so far over, like 800,000 on a 600,000. So
Right.
you're going to be in the game, and you're going to have an opportunity to say yes or no. I think it's really smart. Except if you have two people doing that. Michelle, of the 26 offers that we ended up with, how many didn't have escalation clauses? And talk about the no cap situation of what we did.
I would say of the 26, and I apologize, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I would say of the 26, maybe there were 15, 16 with no escalation clauses. And we did get one offer with no cap, which we were potentially working a little bit with that offer. But, my concern was that we'd get down to that offer, we'd go back with the number and then they'd say, no, thank you. And then we had the other ones cool off. So it was a little bit of a wild card, but we had it in play for a little bit. But I think I like your strategy that was just thrown out in terms of just putting in a higher number, knowing that potentially the listing agent or the seller will direct the listing agent to call you back. But the no cap thing was a little strange to me. It was the first time I'd ever seen it and never thought about, as a buyer's agent, using a no cap situation.
Well, the problem's when you have 2 people or more with no cap, and then you have nothing. So my suggestion to Michelle in that situation is, let's go back and tell them that the seller won't accept no cap, and that we need some top end, or else we can't consider it. And so that was just that was my recommendation. Mo, how about you?
Yeah, I saw that was something that you all had dealt with on those 26 offers. And I have actually heard from a couple other agents in the office recently who have come to me and said they got offers with no caps, and they just disregarded them. I mean, they didn't even get an opportunity to play because, there's a lot going on, and I think it makes the listing agent and the sellers confused. It becomes problematic rather than helpful. I think it works against the agents, but I have worked with that same agent in Silver Spring that puts the crazy caps out there. The first time she did it, I just thought she didn't know the market, but later on I got other offers from her and I realized that's her strategy. And she won on several multiple offers. Yeah.
Let's talk about the incremental difference, because sometimes people don't focus enough on that other number in the escalation clause, Brad, and they come up with, I've had them $500 on $1 million property. They're offering 500 over. So what do you like to do as a buyer's agent, Brad?
I mean, it all comes down to want with the buyers, right? So you really want it, do 10,000, do 20,000, do 25,000. I haven't seen many more than that. Maybe you have in the upper ranges. It was funny. We had 16 offers out in Terra Road, switching it to deposits. Like we had one agent, they gave us a $10,000 deposit on a $1 million house. We called her up and said, hey, look, you got a good offer, but you're not in the game. So she raises it to 15,000. So she wasn't in the game. So,
apparently in more ways than one.
Well, you tried to help her.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's all down to buyers want.
Right. How about you, Mo? like the incremental amount?
I always go high and I go weird. So
Mhm.
like on $1 million property, I might do $5,172. It makes it stand out a little bit. I don't know if Alana's on here, but I sort of thought Alana would do odd numbers too.
918, always got a 918 in there.
Okay, I knew that you did something like
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
But I just thought, sometimes, and this is going back some years, somebody could buy a house because their escalation was $2 more, with their incremental increase. So I do it as large as I can and a weird number on the end.
All right, Michelle?
I was just going to say, out of those 26 offers, like the 12 that has escalations, only one agent thought to do that. And they actually ended in a 5. So it wasn't even that weird, but at least they weren't zeros.
Yeah, I never
rest
ended
were
with
all
0
zeros.
or a 5. Yeah, I always
Right.
odd.
Right.
There's a couple of people in the chat box that made a note that they are using a no cap and that it's working. I just think it really depends on how the listing agent is going to handle that. And I'm sure you will have success in some areas and other agents will shoot you down. I guess my recommendation would be to take the lead from the listing agent. And if the agent calls you back to Brad's idea of kissing the listing agent's ass, you really need to kind of see how does the agent want to respond to it. And if they say, hey, look, we need a cap, then I think you have to consider backpedaling and not pushing the agent into saying, you have to do it this way or my way, because I don't think that will potentially serve you well.
Wendy, why not just make the phone call? I call you up. Hey, Wendy, are you taking it with no caps? And then that way.
I would tell you no. You know what I'm saying? I think if you ask, you're better off. If you really want to do that, I think asking in advance is going to potentially. It's like offering a verbal offer. A lot of times it's just easier to say no to something verbal than if it's all in writing and done. Any last thoughts on escalation clauses from the buyer side? Go ahead.
I wanted to throw in there because there was something that was very clear from your guys' 26 offers. There were agents who were who were continuing to reach out, to engage with you guys, see what they could do to improve their offers. That to me really is what it all boils down to. And if you are in a no cap situation, what that's saying is, I would just want the first opportunity. Give me the first opportunity to say no. And you can communicate that verbally. Like my folks will go 200,000 over or whatever. They just want to be able to have the first opportunity. And as long as you've built that relationship with the listing agent, I think that just goes a long way, because I think we even felt more obligated to give folks a shot because they seem to be working so much harder on their side than the folks that just sent in an offer and we didn't hear from them.
Relationships are huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Michelle, how many of the offers that came in had letters, photos of the family, and do you guys think as a buyer agent, we're not talking, listing side, but is it effective? Do you guys, well, either side we could talk, do we think it's effective?
So of those offers, 3 of them had letters and photos, but based on Teresa's direction as a listing agent, those were not passed along to the buyers.
Yeah.
Photos are a no-no, right?
Well, I think it's a little different in a mega multiple also compared to whether or not you have 1 or 2 offers. Mo, do you include a letter, photos? I mean, we all learned no to the photos, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't like the letters. I don't like the letters, and I don't advise people to write them, but I've had.
As a buyer agent or a listing agent?
As a buyer agent.
Okay.
I'm just not sure that it just doesn't put us in a funny position. And no, I don't like them. But I have had people write them against my recommendation.
Brad,
and I've won because of those letters. I mean, I hate to say it. I'm saying as a listing agent, I don't pass them along, but as a buyer's agent, I've used them, and I swear the seller said, we worked with your offer because X, Y, and Z.
I happen to be a believer in the letters as a buyer's agent, not in sending photos, but if like you're talking, Mo, about making the connection with the agent, I think if you can make a connection with the seller, then your offer sometimes has more sway than anybody else. So I would say to take it to the next step and you have two people to win over. You know, we know the agent can help you or harm you, but really, if you can make a back end around to a connection to the seller, ultimately, I don't want to say too much, but ultimately on the 26th, there was a connection to the seller that helped make a decision. So any thoughts to that, Brad?
I've never been one to want to deal with the letters. Doesn't mean I'm right or wrong.
Yeah.
But I know some sellers love looking at them and to get that emotion. And again,
Yeah,
I agree with the
find,
picture.
yeah, the people that have been in their home for a long time,
Yes.
Right.
raise their family in the house, they feel like, you know, they're selling their home, not their house, if you know what I'm saying, versus somebody that's been there a couple of years or they're flipping a house, you know, they don't really have a strong connection to the house. So we're getting some other people saying they like the letters too.
Well,
So
and, and I would be remiss if I didn't just put my little 2 cents in as a
Yeah.
broker. So from a buyer's agent standpoint, if you want to use that as to your advantage, then by all means, go ahead and try to use it as a buyer's agent. As a listing agent, I would recommend that you never, ever allow your sellers to see letters or photos. Photos, it's clearly a no-no, right? But even in letters, people can put extraneous information or little details that will help sway somebody. And then here's the other issue too. If you show a letter one time, then is that your general practice? If you ever get brought up in front of the commission, they will say, well, what's your standard practice? And then you could, well, why did you show these letters as opposed to your general practice never showing letters? So I think you just need to have a rule of thumb as a listing agent. And to me, the rule of thumb that you go with is never letting your clients see any letters, any photos, because in the end, you're protecting them and you're protecting yourself from real estate jail.
Agreed.
okay.
I mean, how do you, I just like I am Googling and reaching out about agents, you know, people can, there's a lot of information out there about people. You can look up the sellers, you can look where their kids went to school or, you know, what social clubs they belong. You can write a letter that is total BS just to achieve your goals of getting the house. So I'm a suspicious person by nature. And so to me, they're worrisome, but obviously I'm seeing the comments here and I see people disagree.
Yeah. Well, that's why we bring it up. We just talk about it and then you decide, you know, what you want to do. Mo, since I got you there, when do you ask when offers are being presented? If you don't see any, a listing comes up, you think it's your people jump on it, they like it. Do you ask when the seller's going to present offers?
I call the agent and I try to be kind of cool about it. I don't come right out with that question. I ask all kinds of questions all around it with hopes that the agent will reveal to me what their intentions are, and then I act nonplussed by it, but I have the information. If I really need to know and I'm not getting that information from them and I've talked to them for way too long, then I just ask.
Okay, Michelle, how about you? I'm leading into something and then we're going to flip on this and we're going to talk about it. Yeah, go ahead. Michelle, do you ask if when they're accepting offers?
Not necessarily. However, I will, if I know my client wants the house, obviously I don't want to miss the opportunity. So I'm constantly staying in contact with that agent, both via email, making sure they have my contact information. I just ask them to please keep me posted if any offers are registered or received before you hear back. I believe my clients have interest and would certainly potentially like the opportunity. And that's kind of how I leave it.
All right. I know Brad's in two places at one time. Actually, now he's behind his wheel. So
Yeah.
I just don't know, Brad, if you have anything you want to add to that chat.
Yeah, I'm always going to call and ask, you know, what's your plan? See, my problem is we just put a new one on yesterday and you got 14 agents who want to be alerted as to what's going on. I can't do that.
Yeah,
Right.
Mhm.
And then
And
you
so-
sometimes forget like who you're supposed to call, you know, that's
Right.
not, and then you're upset that you don't have an opportunity. So it's a little after 10. So I want to shift to the listing side. And I want to talk about this like from the listing side. So I just put a listing on the market in Avenel, and I have agents asking when we're presenting, and I don't want to be presumptuous enough to think we're even going to potentially be in a multiple. So certain times you put a little hot house in Chevy Chase for $1 million on the market, and you know you're setting up a presentation time. But in my market, Potomac, although everybody's coming back to Potomac now, but that's another story. I'm seeing all you DC agents out my way, but I'm saying you just don't know for sure whether or not you're going to end up in a multiple. So at what point, Mo, would you direct a seller to add a deadline when you're not sure you're going to end up with multiples? So how do you, at what point do you pick it?
Well, I sort of tell them going in that what the possibilities are. And then I say, we'll go on the market Thursday. We'll have an open house Sunday. And if we do get offers, let's plan to look at them Tuesday or Wednesday. But you just never know. What I have gotten caught short on is when I've tried to be helpful by putting in the remarks that we're going to look at offers on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then ending up with absolutely no offers. So I don't do that anymore.
You don't do what anymore?
I don't put the comments in the computer
right.
About when we're looking at offers.
Okay, Michelle, how about you?
Well, in this case, on this home, when I saw about 60 showings scheduled between Saturday and Sunday, I knew, and I got calls of people registering offers. At that point, I felt because there were such huge interest, I wanted to be very certain that we were being fair to everyone and giving everyone the opportunity, that we did put in a deadline in the MLS so that everyone knew, and it was very clear. For the same reason someone mentioned, there's no way I was concerned I was going to miss people by calling them back and keeping them in the loop.
Yeah. That's a different situation though.
Right, only when you're very certain, because I agree, I've also seen it work in reverse where you put that deadline and nothing comes in. And sometimes I think that also really scares away potential buyers from making the offer. So I think it can definitely backfire.
Wendy, there was a couple questions about highest and best. When do you utilize highest and best? So if you can kind of work that into this conversation.
Yeah, we'll work that in. That's on our listing, on our seller side. So we're getting there. And then, sorry, I just lost my thought there. Brad, what happens when you've set a deadline? Is he still on here?
Yes, he's there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you set an early deadline and then somebody comes in and says, hey, I have an offer that's expiring at, you set it for Monday, and then they've come in Friday and said it's good till midnight on Friday. Like, how do you, how do you handle that with your seller?
If I have in the computer it's Monday and you write it on Friday, I'm going to abide by what's in the computer. If you get overly aggressive and you really, really want me to see it, of course I got to call the seller, but then I have to tell the seller, you're going to have to respond to this. So I never want to see offers before a deadline. I think the ethical part of this is, I sold a listing earlier this year. It was a coming soon. I called the agent, will you let me in and show it? She goes, yeah. So, I was a beneficiary of her being very nice.
Her being unethical, but that's another story. Yeah.
Yeah. But the other thing, we just
yeah.
put a listing on Cheltenham, and the conversation with my sellers are, I will give you a call tomorrow or Friday and let you know what the response is and how we're accepted. And then you'll decide what we're doing. Are we going through the weekend, or are we taking the first in? And then you have to, you alert them. If you say first in, you are going to look at that offer and you are going to respond to that offer. And if you're not willing to do that, then we're not dealing with it, and we'll go Tuesday at 2 or whatever.
Right. Mo, Michelle, any comment? And Teresa?
I just won in multiples on a funny little situation on a property in Chevy Chase that had been on the market for 3 weeks, maybe a month, but they kept coming down in the price. And when I called the agent, she said, we have an offer right now that's in counter. So if you can get your offer in, before they get back to us, we can look at it. Then she called me about an hour or so later and said, I've just had another offer registered. So now there are 3 of us, and I'm the buyer's agent, competing where it wasn't multiples before. It got very convoluted, but we won.
That can happen because I've said in the past that usually in my multiple offer situations, it's rarely with a brand new listing, and it happens when prices come down or then or people that have been kind of hanging around. I'm fascinated by the number of people that say, call me if an offer's registered.
Yeah.
And then you let them know and then they write. I mean, it's like, what were you waiting for? Why are people waiting to have somebody else that wants the house? There's some sort of psychology on that. I just don't.
Well,
really,
the psychology is powerful because on this property that I won on, the sellers were so cross with the first offer, which must have been too low because they had to counter offer it, that when it came back and there were 3 of us, they just disregarded them because they had hurt their feelings.
Yeah. Yep, that's fascinating. Do you guys have a preference if you put a listing on the computer Thursday or Friday? Like, do you have a magic day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? Like at some point, I think if you wait too long, you worry about people cooling off. But if you don't give enough time, sometimes you could cut yourself short. Do you have a day, Mo, that you kind of?
Well, in this market, Thursday, and then if there's multiple offers, to look at them Tuesday.
Okay, Michelle, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I would say Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday for sure. I think Friday's too late.
Yeah.
You mean a week? Like I'm saying, if you put it on the market on a Thursday, a Wednesday or Thursday, how long are you waiting to present the file? You're saying Tuesday or Wednesday the following week? Is that what you're saying, Michelle?
I haven't given an answer to that, but in this case, our clients, we put it on, they wanted to negotiate that by Monday night, which I'm going to tell you, I learned is too soon. That date needed to be Tuesday. Obviously it wasn't my call, but it was overwhelming and we needed more time, I think, to
well, I
sort
think
through all
the
that.
answer is if you're in like a mega multiple and you're encouraging, pre-inspections and stuff. I just saw an agent in Avenel wait 2 weeks to look at any offers, and they ended up selling it I'm sure it was a clean offer. I don't know how they did on price yet, but there is different strategy to that. Teresa?
Well, I was just going to say, as a buyer's agent out there, guys, you've got to, in this market, you've got to use every tool at your disposal. And just because somebody says they're not reviewing offers until X date doesn't mean that somebody's going to get their way in there. And we've had, just within the past week, and I see Jeremiah shaking his head, been told, okay, contracts are going to be reviewed at such and such time, and then they're sold, or they're under contract. And we're not sure exactly how that transpired, but I know that we've been on the listing side when things like that have happened. We had a date that was set for contract review, but somehow a buyer had gone by the property enough times. They struck up a conversation with the seller. We would like to submit an offer on this. The seller then communicates to the listing agent, hey, so-and-so just stopped by, go ahead, I'm going to take a look at their offer. So, I mean, and then everybody who was sort of playing by the rules and waiting till the review date just totally missed out. So I think whatever you guys can use, and I think the communication piece is key to really stay in touch with the listing agent if there is significant interest in the property.
Yeah, Trevor, it's not an ethical violation because if the seller says they want to accept an offer that they've seen, they have the right to do it. What's not great is that it's not great agent to agent relationship. And when you get known as the agent that's going to like underhand, and God forbid it's your own offer, then you're really screwed as far as people feeling like you didn't play fair in the sandbox. So I think that a way around it, just kind of from the conversation I'm thinking, is if you registered an offer, and I don't like buyer's agents sometimes will register an offer and they don't actually have it signed. So if I'm a listing agent, I will say, hey, you're registering an offer. Does that mean you have a signed offer? Oh, no, but it's coming. I'm like, okay, you call me back when you have a signed offer. So that way, then you're and then I would follow it up with something in writing to say, I have a signed offer. If you look at anything early, please let me know, and I will send, if the seller's going to make a switch in decision. And then you're setting yourself apart from the call me if you're going to accept something earlier. And to Brad's point, you can't remember all the people. So I like the idea of registering it and say, I will send it over as soon as the seller's prepared to review it. Brad?
That is a great.
Wendy, one other thing in this crazy market, like with your deal with the 26 offers, and you may forget to ask, how many of those buyers did not physically see the property? So if you have 26 offers, are you going to sell it to somebody who never saw it?
Yes. I mean, well, that's more important when you have 2 or 3. And I did have that happen on Stapleford Hall, where the agents, walked them through virtually and they didn't physically see it. And then when I told them we're taking another offer because the other people have seen it, I think the guy lied to me and told me he had seen it months ago. So I'm like, oh God, I hope you're not, whatever. It's so I absolutely will discount something that somebody physically hasn't walked through. I think that's probably unanimous. Michelle, did you make sure that, and then in your case, you actually wanted them to have a pre-inspection. So let's talk a minute about what happened to you, because somebody had a pre-inspection and then started talking to her about things that were wrong in the house. And we really think it was like a setup. So I'd like to just kind of explain a little bit about what happened with that.
So yes, somebody actually unrepresented had come in to see the house. Family lives in the neighborhood, and came in and then decided he potentially wanted to write an offer, but he wanted to do a pre-inspection, which was fine. While doing the pre-inspection, he asked me, when I get the report, should I send it to you?
Oh.
To which we said, no, thanks. That's for your informational purposes only. So he did it. He then called he called to give us the terms of his offer. And while he was giving the terms of the offer, he then proceeded to say that, because these are the terms of my offer because of X, Y, and Z, at which time I cut him off at the pass when he was speaking. So he said, you know what, we'll pick this up. I'll speak to you tomorrow. At which point I wanted to turn him on to someone on the team just to keep it at arm's length, potentially to write the offer for him, because I really didn't want to be any parts of that. But then the next morning I wake up to an email with the terms of his offer, also outlining some of the things briefly that the inspector found. So all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, of course I did not respond to that email, but I picked up the phone right away to speak to Wendy and speak to Teresa about it, because I felt like now, even though I didn't have an actual report, he did put in writing to me some things that supposedly were found in the house. And I wanted to figure out where I was in terms of a disclosure issue. And then we made the decision that anyone who has come through the house or was going to come through the house, that we wanted to make aware what was told to us, and absolutely encourage people to do pre-inspections, bring in contractors, whatever they would like, because while we weren't sure, we didn't have an actual report, this is what was told to us.
So in the famous words of Marion Barry, like the bitch set us up on that a little bit. Totally. And so what we just did is we said, I don't know if you told absolutely everybody, Michelle, but the serious contenders, we said, hey, look, please check it out. We don't know if somebody's told us some things that were wrong in the house, because they still are writing, okay? But
right.
To encourage us and to just kind of see how we were going to respond in that situation. And we decided that, because it was a relation, somebody else on the street, that in all likelihood, the end buyer was going to be, was going to find out that somebody had an inspect. I mean, that's not why we did it, but it added to the reason that we were going to do it, because it was likely going to come out to the buyer later, and we didn't want that coming back to us. Mo, you have a comment on any of this?
Did that buyer prevail?
No.
No.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm thinking while you're talking that unrepresented buyers are problematic in a situation like this, and probably sooner rather than later, he should have been aligned with some kind of an agent but I think that person must have been pretty smart and knew what they were doing. But how do you?
I don't know how.
Can't you turn them over to another aide, to an agent
That's
somewhere?
what she did.
So after that happened, I picked up the phone and I let them know that at this time, I thought the best path forward was to him to either engage, a buyer's agent. And if he did not want representation, an agent who could simply write an offer for him. And I'd be happy to give him a list of agents to help him with that if he needed to do that.
Okay, but my takeaway now is if that ever happened to me, I would immediately plug them into an agent. I can't believe he did that, but I think it was a plan.
Yeah.
You mean plug him into an agent
Right
before
away.
he even did the during the pre-inspection period?
Right away.
Well, I think it's different when you're going to be in a mega multiple situation too. Sometimes, the reality is, look, that's a record for me in 32 years. The odds of that happening, to most of us is Teresa's seeing it, but generally speaking, it's not all that common. But Mo, let's say you do have 2 or 3 offers and one of them is yours. Like, how do you make sure that the other agent feels comfortable, feels like they're, your buyer's not your prospect. It's not going to be your buyer. A lot of buyers are coming directly to the listing agent in that situation because they think it's going to give them an advantage.
Right.
So talk to me about how do you handle that?
I don't. I just tell people right up front, I don't work with the buyers if I'm the listing agent. And
Okay.
I'll find them someone who can help them.
Okay.
And I've had that problem where I'm the listing agent and someone I know wants to buy the property. And that has really been difficult for me because I'm always going to have someone cross with me. But I don't do that.
How do you handle it? Oh, Mo, these lawyers that come in and say, oh, I'm going to represent myself, which we see a lot because they think they're going to, and it's like, well, you're not a real estate lawyer, are you? How do you handle that? If they just don't want representation, they think they're going to represent themselves.
Yeah, I've had that happen many times over the years, but I've never actually had that person end up with the property.
I think you're at a huge disadvantage when they do that.
Yeah.
Because then as a listing agent that they don't have an advocate behind them helping to guide them, and it's not something they do every day. You wouldn't go to a heart surgeon for a dermatological issue. So then you get somebody that has some knowledge about the law, but they don't know what's customary. And I think that person really puts themselves at a disadvantage.
They put themselves at a huge disadvantage, and things can go south so quickly. I'm getting a call that I need to answer, but Jeremiah, we just went through this situation, and like I said, things went south very, very quickly. Jeremiah, if you can, from an office procedural standpoint, just so folks know, and I see somebody, Christine wrote, Teresa will handle it. Jeremiah and I have been involved in several negotiations where somebody either is chosen to go unrepresented, or maybe somebody on the team has written an offer, or even yourself, you've gone there, they've chosen to go unrepresented, but you've helped them write the offer. So Jeremiah, I'm going to turn it over to you really quickly to answer that question.
Okay, what I think is important is when someone approaches you about a listing agent about writing an offer. Obviously, we can do it, but just remember, as Mo said, if you're not comfortable doing it, let's bring somebody else in. And if you do choose to write on your own listing, this is when you bring in a manager to present. So that's 2 important things to remember. If you're not comfortable at all, that's typically when things are going to go south. Make sure you bring another agent in, and definitely bring managers in when you're presenting.
Great, thank you. We have just a couple minutes left, and I think one of the really big parts of a listing agent that of this conversation is how do you get to a best offer for the seller in a multiple. And so I want to talk about it. There's a couple different strategies. Some people, take the top couple of offers and then say, send it back and give me your highest and best. Personally, I don't like that as a listing agent. I never do that. But is Brad still on the phone? Because I know he had at 10:30. Is he still here?
I don't see him.
Okay, if he is, pop in. But otherwise, Michelle, how do you, in a multiple as a listing agent, how do you get to figure out what's, there's a difference actually between highest and best, because I think we all can agree that the highest offer is not always the best offer. But how do you go back and work the agents that are perhaps at the top? Do you just go ahead and pick from the top? How do you go back and forth without having people pissed off and upset?
Well, I'll speak in this certain case. So it came down to maybe, let's say, like 3 or 4 offers that they were working. And in this case, I think an interesting point is to the seller, it was actually not driven completely by highest dollar amount. There were other terms that were more important to them. So I started working through those terms. And once I got to those terms that they wanted, then we went back and started working on the finance piece of it. But I never really asked during this negotiation for a final and best. We just kept working the offers forward and up, if you will.
Yeah.
Mo, do you do that?
I have never, ever asked for a best and final, never. In any circumstance, I like the dialogue, I like the give and take, but to me, I have found that the relationships that are happening, evolving through the contract presentation really point me into the direction of the best offer. And sometimes, like Michelle said, it's the terms that are in the contract outside of the price. The last several years, the multiple offer situations I've been in, the sellers have not selected the highest price, but they have selected the offer that had the terms and conditions that were most agreeable to them, and they've all worked out. But I never go back to anybody and ask for best and final. I have never done that.
So how do you handle when you call somebody back and they say, I'm sorry, you didn't get it. And they said, well, wait, we will raise our offer. How do you not do that?
Well, I think in a situation where everybody has an escalation clause, I talk to the agents before I present and ask, is there anything else your folks would be willing to do that I don't know about? And is this your best offer? And they say yes. So when we're in chin deep in figuring out what the best offer is and what they're going to work with, I don't want to start calling 6 or 26 agents and find out what their best offer is. I think if they're putting their best foot forward and they're willing to do what they've said they're going to do, then that's what we're going to work with.
In a mega multiple situation where I'm talking 5 offers or more, we in that case, we put in 2 piles. Anybody with any contingencies, financing, appraisal, home inspection, anything like that went into 1 pile and was really completely disregarded. And we were left with like the fully contingency free, and there was no HOA here, because that's kind of an important point. If you have an HOA, to some degree it's contingent. However, if you get the documents in advance of writing the contract, the HOA 5 days can be waived. I lost one in Avenel years ago to Sharon Goldman because her clients went and got the HOA documents in advance, and she didn't have that in as a contingency. So go back and read that. Anybody that wants to win in an HOA should be thinking about doing that. But the other point is that when I'm presenting, if I've got 3 or 4 offers and it's pretty clear that 1 or 2 are in the running, I will go back to 3 and 4 before I even talk to the seller. And I will say, hey, look, I just want you to know, out of the 4 offers, you're in 4th position. And then they inevitably will say, oh, well, where do I have to be? I will never tell them, well, you have to be 850. Because I don't know what that number is, and I wouldn't do that to the 850 offer. So 3rd and 4th, no, and probably 2nd, 3rd, 4th, no, that they're not in 1st position. And so to me, like that, I've had agents that lose the house and then thank me because at least their buyer was given the opportunity to buy the house. And you can't always expect that that the listing agent is going to run a multiple that way. And sometimes it's very clear that one offer is definitely compelling, and you really don't have to do that, but because nobody's going to be able to beat it. But sometimes, you know, you want to think about, well, not sometimes, you want to remember that you're representing the seller, and your offers to get them the best terms and the best price that's possible. So any final wrap-ups? I see that it's 10:30. Any last comments, Mo?
I just think it's so, I like what you're saying. I'm learning from that. And that's where I think the relationships just come in, being able to have those conversations. I'm always fearful that, you know, in the heat of the moment that someone, a buyer, will make a decision or say they're going to do something and then regret it the next day. So you have to make sure that you've dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's so that there's, you know, your seller's not exposed. But yeah, I'm always very keen on who I'm working with and what I feel confident they can do once this multiple offer situation is over and we're really into the weeds and getting to settlement.
Great. Michelle, any last thoughts?
No, I think this has been great, and I'm lucky to have learned from one of the best. So for that, I thank you.
Well, I think we can all, there's always something to learn. So I appreciate, and Brad, you know, I appreciate Brad had to check out. He was with us as long as he could. And thank you, Mo. Thank you, Michelle, Teresa, Jeremiah. You know, sometimes you hear these things and you pick, you know, some of it's old stuff that you remember, and hopefully everybody gets something new from it. So thank you all for coming, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank
So
you.
good to see you. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Michelle. Thanks, Brad.
Jeremiah, and thank
Thank
you,
you, Mo.
Brad. I don't know where he went. I'll see you guys in a little bit.
Sounds good.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.